Ukrainians forced to flee their homes because of war, some of them Holocaust survivors and others fleeing for a second time.
You can imagine the atmosphere, nervous tension, and an unpredictable destiny. What can one expect other than being murdered?
Almost all the buildings around us burned down. It was a miracle that our building didn't burn. When a mortar hits a building, it starts a fire, and there are no means to extinguish it. There is no water in the city.
While a nightmare for many fleeing Ukrainians, these Jewish refugees have a unique hope for the future.
I will say something that I heard in the borders when the Jewish community waiting for people there, and there's buses, and they know where they're going to live, and they know that Israel is helping them to come. They say, if already to be a refugee, it's better to be a Jewish refugee.
The Israeli government and Jewish organizations are banding together to make it possible. Alona Grosu of the Jewish community of Moldova says when they heard about the war, they knew the world would never be the same.
So from this day, we've started organizing a rescue operation for the members of Jewish communities from Ukraine.
Until a few weeks ago, this was a tennis center in Chisinau, Moldova. That changed overnight when Russia invaded Ukraine. The municipality opened the center for fleeing refugees, and the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, along with the local Jewish community, stepped in to help.
Here, with the Jewish community, with the Joint, with all the organization, we built an opportunity to have places for the people to sleep, to eat, to be in a safe, warm place.
More than 10,000 eligible Ukrainians have immigrated to Israel since the war began. They are fleeing Ukraine through Poland, Hungary, Romania, and about a third have escaped through Moldova. From the border of Moldova, these refugees are taken either to the Israeli consulate or the Hub Tennis Center, where the Jewish agency determines their eligibility to immigrate to Israel. The Foreign Ministry provides them with documents, and the IFCJ books them on charter flights. That's where CBN News met Ludmila Polunova, her mother Tetiana, and 16-year-old son Andrei.
It's a catastrophe. It was a miracle that we were able to leave Mariupol now. On March 12th, an aircraft bomb fell next to our house. All the windows, glass, window frames, and doors were shattered in the apartment. It was freezing outside, and it was impossible to stay in the apartment.
Ludmila and her family lived in the basement for a week.
We're thankful to the neighbors. We survived because of them. We left thanks to my son. We found out that in the 9-story building next door, there was a phone reception on the 9th floor. My son remembered that his classmate lived in the neighboring town of Mangush, and her father owned a minibus. My son ran to the 9th floor, called her, and her father took us out the very next day.
It wasn't the first time this family had to escape. They fled the Donetsk region in 2014. This time they have a different outlook.
We expect peace. We expect some kind of well-being, a peaceful life. We were kicked out of Donetsk, kicked out of Mariupol, and now I simply don't know what to do. I want a future for my son.
I hope everything will go well in Israel, that this whole thing will be over. It's hard to move, of course. All my friends are in Ukraine. But at least there will be peace in Israel.
I think Israel is our salvation, and I think everything will go well for us. The main thing is for us to be healthy, to be alive, because we couldn't even hope that everything would end so well.
Until their departure, refugees are housed at places like this guest house outside Chisinau. Holocaust survivor Zinovii Lekarev came here after he turned 86 on March 16th.
I didn't have a birthday. There was bombing and shelling. That's why I was at home. 2 rocket explosions happened about 50 to 60 meters from our house. We were at home. These were frightful explosions. Everything shook. The entire 9-story building was shaking. That's when I decided to leave.
It brought back scary memories.
In September 1941, under bombing and shelling of the trains we were in, we left the city. We returned to Kharkiv in March of 1944.
And 78 years later, with just a plastic bag in hand, Zinovii was on the run again. But this time he has 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters, and a great-granddaughter waiting for him in Israel.
I'm very happy that I'm finally going to leave this hell, but it's very unpleasant and heavy for me.
When the hotels and guest houses were full, they opened this warehouse where we met Vera Chimran. She also recalled her first time having to leave everything behind.
My first evacuation took place 81 years ago in 1941. I remember a freight car. There was a transit camp like this, only this one is comfortable. Back then, the only thing we had was a blanket.
Vera returned to Kharkiv after World War II and stayed put until now.
What can I say? I feel more cheerful. I'm able to move again. Before, I stopped moving. I had COVID with bad complications. My leg was paralyzed. I couldn't even imagine that I'd travel such distances as I didn't leave the house for half a year.
So far, the IFCJ has helped more than 2,200 refugees fly to Israel from Moldova since the war started. But this time, it's not a regular aliyah.
It's saving life, saving the souls.
Benny Haddad says they usually have a chance to prepare new immigrants before they come.
Now it's a short time. You're touching the people for 2 seconds. They're coming here, they want as much as faster to be there because they live as refugees here without anything. And the main goal is to send them to Israel and save them from here.
Here at the Kishinev airport, these people behind me are no longer Ukrainian refugees. Within a few hours, they'll be citizens of Israel, fulfilling biblical prophecy. Zinovii and Ludmila, Tetiana, and Andrei were among 112 new immigrants and 9 pets CBN News joined on the 3-hour flight back to Israel. And then they were home.
We don't comprehend it yet. We're happy.
Thank God there's no shooting. No shooting. I hope I'll never hear it again. At my age, it's a new beginning. I don't know how to explain this. At this age, people hang up their fiddle completely, but I decided to change everything from the start.
This is the first day of their new adventure as Israelis. It may not be easy here, but they'll be planted in the land of their forefathers and should never have to run away again. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Kishinev, Moldova, and Tel Aviv, Israel.